A lot of teachers that we've been speaking to over the last few months are really concerned that a lot of the parties don't address the issues that they're really concerned about. So we thought we'd make an opportunity for them to ask them face to face.
The question I want to ask is, how are the different parties going to help young people and children to have the skills and the knowledge to deal with the issues of climate change?
Well, I'm hoping that we will have all of the candidates for the local election being prepared to commit themselves to something that's really valuable using the principles that we've set out here in our manifesto for education.
Hopefully, as a teacher in an early years classroom in Bristol, to be more informed about the MP's views on education.
I hope I've made the prospective parliamentary candidates and the sitting MP think about education, particularly on a day when 20,000 young people have not had a place allocated at their chosen school.
The key to making Britain a more socially mobile place is through high quality education delivered through schools working with a professional teaching organisation and group of teachers. We need local oversight, so we'll introduce a locally elected director of school standards to set improvement challenges in local areas, and they'd also be responsible for commissioning new schools as well.
The education has become a bit of a lottery between those who can afford for extras, for the wraparound that we know makes for a person who has good life skills, and those who can't afford and can't access those kind of opportunities.
I'm concerned that schools, much as Darren mentioned just now, are being run very much as though they're a business. And they're not a business, they're a service. I'm married to a teacher and I know what it's all about. My sister's also a teacher. In fact, we've got lots of teachers in the family.
Teachers need more support. My brother-in-law's a teacher and he's telling me he's working 68 hours a week all of a sudden. When he came into teaching, it was an enjoyable vocation, because it's not a job, which is what people are trying to change it to. It's a vocation.
Hello, I'm a reception teacher, and working in the early years I know that very young children work best learning through play. However, with the introduction of the baseline assessment, I'm concerned that both play and practitioners' expertise is going to be sidelined in favour of a more formal, narrow way of assessing children's progress. So I'd like to know what your views are on the importance of children's play and baseline assessment.
I've read the manifesto, and some children as young as 5 are tested and obviously set up to, if they fail there, that's a bit of a stigma on them at such an early age. So I think it's important that for children that age, you do have play at the centre of their life in the reception or the nursery. To test children that young, I think it's wrong, and there's too much pressure on children that age. They should be free to develop naturally, like say, through play rather than through tests.
This is a matter of very grave concern to our union, very grave indeed. And I want to say that what we're against, what early years teachers are against, is not assessing pupils, because they do it all the time and they do it really skillfully. I'm a secondary school teacher, mainly taught 15 to 18-year-olds. But really, I'm in awe of my early years practitioners, because if you locked me in a room with 3 and 4-year-olds, I'd be climbing out the window. I love 15-year-olds, because they're wonderful. But they're not saying they don't want to test. What they're saying is, we already assess the young people that come into our lessons. We want to keep on doing that in ways that we think are appropriate, in ways that are not invasive, in ways that do not that make young people feel that they're failing. What we're against is them having simple yes-no tick box assessment using laptops, where they're then told that they're a failure because they got 31 out of 40 instead of 32 out of 40. Our young people deserve better, and our early years practitioners are perfectly capable of assessing in a really clever, subtle and brilliant way that will allow those young people to make an excellent transition into Key Stage 1.
I certainly recognise that children's play is important. I visit all the nursery schools in Bristol West, a particularly good relationship with Liz at St Werburgh's nursery, and definitely would support her and the profession in making sure that all the teachers in the earlier setting over time have that qualification. But obviously play, when you're dealing with sort of 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, is incredibly important, and you can learn a lot through play, and you continue to do that as an adult. That's again coming back to how schools should prepare people for what comes to you later in life. You role play as an adult as well, and obviously children can learn from play too, and that certainly should not be squeezed out of the curriculum at all.
Well, yes, I believe that play is really important, particularly at the age group we're talking about in the early years, because I think that children there learn to be able to communicate, they learn rules, they learn how to make friendships and relationships, and that's what I would call the baseline, actually beginning to learn when you actually go into formal education. From my own experience from work, we've used play as a way of bringing back into mainstream education youngsters, well, I say youngsters from the age of 7 to 14, back into mainstream education by using play. One example would be in Bristol, where we had some guys who had been excluded from school, and we got them to do their maths through basketball. So play all through your life, I think. You can always learn something through play.
Yeah, I think there's a temptation actually to polarise this in that seeing play as an add-on to your early years, whereas the Green Party is firmly of the belief that early years education is about play, and then the curriculum kind of elements, that learning, gets built around that idea of an enjoyable early years education. I think that's one significant difference. Of course, if you take that process then, what you're not doing is a sense of assessing someone on their ability against curriculum stuff. So you're assessing their ability within a social setting, which so much more strengthens the ability to then go on through life. I think teachers are teachers are very good at identifying children's needs within that environment, and we don't need a tick box exercise in order to measure that. The other thing I was interested in, if I've got a very brief moment, I was at a Dragon's Den for young people who were doing projects that they wanted to do to offer back to their peers. 4 out of the 9 projects that came forward was for greater support for children with mental health issues. 4 out of the 9 projects that were coming forward. How is it that our society is producing so many children who've got such significant mental health issues? And I think part of that is to do with the fact that we are pushing them into assessment and stress way too early in the process.
Absolutely. There's no doubt whatsoever that play is the most important, most constructive element. Play, love, nurture. Little kids, that's what they need. And I'm surprised government after government after government make decisions on behalf of all the professionals who definitely know best. So for them to come along and now decide that it's time to do baseline testing on young children, well, that should definitely be abandoned. I have to say the beauty of being independent is that I don't have to look through a book to tell you what I really genuinely believe is right and what I will vote for or against. And that's one of the things that I would, without any shadow of doubt, vote to ditch.
Over 80% of parents believe that local authorities should have power to open new schools. Now, under the present policy, they only have responsibility to ensure that there are enough school places and sufficiently in particular places. In Bristol, this has led to inner city schools being forced to expand in most peculiar and grotesque ways, building on playgrounds, squashing children into tiny little spaces. What's your party going to do about that?
In some of our school playgrounds, vital play space is lost because they've got porta cabins, not just necessarily one, but actually stacked up on each other. Now, this is not the right environment for our children. So we have not given up on local authorities. We think that local authorities, because they're directly democratically accountable to the local people, and that because they've got detailed local knowledge, are the ideal group to have the proper power to provide school places where and when they're needed. So we think it's really important, and we are still talking about local authorities rather than reinventing some new body or other. They're in place, let's give them the power, and let's hold them to account as well.
Thank you.
Local authorities should be the primary deciders of where new school places are needed, and the state should only fund new school places where there is a shortage of places at the moment. We would repeal the rule that at the moment only all new schools should be academies or free schools, so that we're absolutely clear about that as well. Academy change should also be open to inspection by Ofsted, so hopefully that is something completely comprehensive that satisfies you. However, in the 20 seconds I have got left, let's not delude ourselves that local authorities are always the saviours of education. You know, I've been a politician in Bristol for quite a long time, and Bristol City Council was not, let's face it, marvellous at either planning school places or overseeing standards in Bristol schools. So local authorities also do have to be held accountable, not just by the public, but need to be inspected and challenged as well.
Well, I think all schools should be actually under some kind of local authority model. All schools need to be integrated into that system. You know, we also believe that there should be a director of education who should be responsible for the education system in that locality, accountable to the elected members. You know, Stephen says about there was problems in Bristol. What happened was, in my opinion, was Bristol, when it lost its identity to Avon, lost its civic pride, and it's taken probably 15 years to get it back. And I think you're heading to a situation where I think they can cope again.
Actually, I think we're just kind of shooting at the wrong target. The reality is, when you talk to the local authority, that partly due to austerity, partly due to what else is going on in the system, they are finding themselves forced to try and sell off land in order to the highest developer to build other stuff on. Whereas actually, if local authorities had a greater capacity to pay for what's needed by their communities and greater control over the planning system, they would be able to spot these peaks and troughs coming through and then build the places they need. So, of course, this needs to be under local authority control. It's even more difficult when you've got academies and free schools, because it's much more difficult for that local authority to manage the situation. But actually, I think what's happened in Bristol specifically is that we've been selling off the silver in order to build expensive flats and houses.
I'd actually like to make a point here. We've got so many public schools in Bristol that we end up with a very, very different cohort of kids that go into our state schools. So we're never going to rank way, way up there as the lovely leafy suburbs of Middle England. You know, so we have to provide the very best we can for the kids that we've got. Local authorities, I believe, should definitely be in control of our schools. And it shouldn't be something that's run centrally. It should, you know, we need to be putting schools and the building of schools and the distribution of schools, places in schools, all the rest of it, back into local authorities' hands.
You made the new Director of School Standards responsible for commissioning new schools when they're needed and to look at the need in local areas. That Commission of Standards would be accountable democratically. And also, what we'll do is will end the wasteful practice of building schools in places where they're not needed. So obviously that's what's happened with the free school programme. Built in areas where there's no demand whatsoever for schools. Wasted a lot of money. So this new director of standards will be responsible for making sure that schools are built where they're needed and where there's demand.
I think parents used to know that local politicians were accountable for the provision and the standard of education in their area. They knew where to go if they had a query, if they had a complaint. Now it's impossible to find out who to go to if you are worried about your child's education. Everything is done to people all the time. I think we just need more local accountability, more democracy.
How would you evaluate the success or otherwise of the Academy and Free Schools programme, and what would its future be under yourselves?
I think a lot of money has been wasted on academies and free schools. A lot of money that should have been reinvested in actual teaching itself. I've said before, we don't believe that there should be profit within education. So we would actually stop the funding of academies and free school and reintegrate them into a local authority.
We absolutely agree. We would bring free schools and academies back into the local education authority system, full stop.
I believe that the only way that we can ensure that all schools are secure and safe, and that we have somebody to speak to about quality control, if you like, and all the rest of it, is by putting them back into the hands of the local authority.
Said previously, we abolished free schools, which have costed £241 million for school places where they're not needed. On academies, I don't think we're going to change that, but we will bring them under the Director of School Standards. So there will be democratic oversight there, and we'll make sure offset inspections are applicable for academies as well. Part of the biggest issue is the effect it's had on pay bargaining for the NUT, isn't it? So I understand that. I personally don't know what the policy is on that, but I can see how it's had an effect on national pay bargaining for the NUT. So I know where you're coming from on that.
Whilst it's true that it has had an effect on national pay bargaining, that's not really why the union objects to academies and free schools. I'm not going to use my own words. I'm going to just read you a few things from the Education Select Committee report on academies and free schools on the 27th of January this year. And the way the report was spun by certain parties was that competition drives improvement, even though we know that's not true. All the evidence is it's collaboration that drives improvement, like the London Challenge. But what it actually said was these things: current evidence does not prove academies raise standards overall or for disadvantaged children. There's no convincing evidence of impact of academy status on attainment in primary schools. It's too early to draw any conclusions about free schools' impact on the quality of education or their impact on the neighbouring schools, the broader system of education. And what it said is that we should review the lessons that we've learned from the wholesale rapid conversion of secondary schools before we attempt anything like that in primary. And in fact, we shouldn't attempt it. That's what the lesson is. And other really worrying things: the inadequate vetting of sponsors, not enough transparency about performance, the way that the published data is variable quality. And really, we say this is a damning indictment, and we say they should be abolished, not reformed.
I wouldn't, Liberal Democrats wouldn't, and I personally wouldn't abolish academies. I think they have played a useful role in some areas. It entirely depends, though, on the quality of the academy's chain, and that's why we say that they should be they should be inspected by Ofsted in exactly the same way as the strategic role of the local authority is inspected by Ofsted. In Bristol, I think they have played a useful role. And Dawn mentioned earlier one of the issues that worries me as well, the fact that education, particularly in Bristol West, there's a big divide between private schools and state schools. And I worked with the Cathedral School and Colston School to come into the state sector so that those schools are no longer fee paying and provide choice for parents, including for Muslim, you may snigger, sir, but provide choice for Muslim families who want an education of that sort for their daughters.
The next question is from Holly, and I'll read out her question. What are you going to do to make teacher training affordable for trainees doing subjects such as English? Currently, £4,000 bursary against £9,000 tuition fees and very few salaried school direct places in this part of the southwest. It doesn't seem a very attractive proposition. So it is Stephen's turn to start off this time. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, the university funding system itself, what we've said is that we will have a review in the next Parliament of how the new system of tuition fees, which of course is a graduate contribution scheme, all that name is working. And the early evidence is that children or young people from poorer backgrounds are actually accessing higher education to a far greater degree than before. So it's almost counterintuitive compared to what a lot of people were saying, that the new regime would cut off pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds from going into higher education. That's not, so far, not actually happened. In terms of the bursaries for teacher training themselves, I can't promise you that there'll be more generous bursaries right across the range of subjects. The reason the bursaries exist for maths, physics and other STEM subjects is we want to attract people into that, because many of them, unfortunately, I wish teaching was seen as a much more attractive profession. Unfortunately, they are attracted to the city, to banking, that want to use their sort of mathematical skills for developing bonds and other market products, rather than training the children and the scientific minds that we need for the future. So that's why there's a bursary for STEM subjects. I'm not sure it's actually needed to incentivise people to go into English, history and anything else.
Our party will abolish tuition fees, so there's not a problem from that point of view, and we would reinstate a maintenance grant. But we would also be a bursary for all new teachers. There might be different levels for different subjects, but when you're new into the job, you need some assistance and support, and that's what the bursary will be there for. Some people actually call it the golden handcuffs, but we're losing at the moment too many good people who are actually training to be teachers, and then when they are actually trained, they then go into the profession. So we need to change the way we're actually running our teachers into the ground at the moment, but also the new teachers need the support of a bursary in their first year.
The Green Party is absolutely clear on this issue, is that we have to get away from fees in university education, including teacher training. We're saddling an entire generation with tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. It's a crazy situation that we've got ourselves into, and we have to go back to, as Stuart said, the ability for people to get into it. The other point is that I've got a real problem about incentivising people into certain subjects. That actually, I would like to see that people are going into the subjects that they feel they would be best at teaching. And that that would be the sense of what we need to create, is that teaching is a profession that the best people are dying to get into across all of those subjects, because it's professional, it's well paid, the terms and conditions are excellent, they get time off for continuing training through the whole process. So yes, it's a radical shift that we need in the way in which we're doing this whole process.
I would also vote to abolish university fees without any shadow of doubt. I'd also then like to see an introduction or a reintroduction of a grant system, bursaries, so that people who do want to go and study further in order to teach at least have access to some funding, because it is a really expensive, it's difficult. The system we've got right now, we are ultimately going to end up with children only, say, from middle classes, young kids from the middle classes, ending up teaching subjects like history, English, the arts or whatever, because they're not getting any assistance to do so. In fact, we may end up with very, very few quality teachers ultimately because they can't afford. And it's about social divide again. You can't afford going to university because it's their first experience of debt, if you like, and it's a massive debt, 9,000 a year. No, we're investing in our future and investing in our young, and we need to invest in teachers.
Thank you.
Do I think that tuition fees should be free? Yes, I do. But the Labour Party's likely to form the next government. So I ask to outline where every penny of spending is coming from. Now, there's not enough money to get rid of tuition fees, but we've identified enough money to reduce the fees from 9,000 to 6,000. Now, it's not what people want to hear, but it's an improvement on where we are. And we've also found the money to improve the grant by £400 a year as well. I do agree about making teaching more attractive. A friend of mine's got a master's in biology, and he's ended up going to work in the finance sector as a data analysis. So that's a problem with the economy and where the money is. So I think that's a misuse of the skills, but that's where the money is, and there's an issue there.
Just to say, this is a very important question, because we are hurtling towards a problem with teacher supply. By that I mean teachers coming into the profession, beginning their work as teachers, and teachers leaving. Ideally it's perfectly balanced, but what we've seen is that there are far more people leaving than coming into teaching. So it's a really big worry, and I would hope that any future government of whatever complexion would look at it seriously. Bursaries, there is no evidence, it sounds common sense, but I'm going to tell you, there's actually no evidence that bursaries work. So perhaps we should look at how that money is spent. And I say that as a physicist and chemist, although I trained before there were such things. And the current bursaries don't mirror the current teacher shortages, because we're actually facing a shortage of primary school teachers. But at the moment, there's no bursary for that. And yet we know the importance of primary education for our children. So we really need this. We need to look at what early teacher education is like as well, because a figure I got from a sister union, NASUWT, was that 76% of the Teach First graduates that are much lauded as coming into the profession, they're very high academic standards and so on, are no longer teaching by the end of their second year. So that's a very expensive programme if that figure is correct. And I trust my sister union, but I don't have the actual evidence. So we really need a big look at teacher training.
Thank you.
that your questions were answered tonight?
Yes, I think largely my question was answered by most of the candidates here. I'm looking forward to hearing some more feedback from the Lib Dem Democrat candidate who was here tonight who wasn't able to answer my question fully.
In terms of the issues of climate change and resource scarcity that we're going to face in the future, that we should be really thinking about restructuring the education system around how we're going to address that and those needs in the future.
Well, first of all, tremendous thanks to Bristol NUT for hosting this wonderful event. Great audience. Lots of very positive comments from the panel. So what we really need to do is to hold people to account after the election, because what they're saying is you need to value teachers, we want proper education, quality education for all our children. So let's see what happens after the election. And if they want any good advice, there are lots of people here who can tell them the way forward.